Hi, my name is Andrea Goyen, and I'm the Environmental Literacy and Sustainability Coordinator at the San Mateo County Office of Education. In this video, I'm going to provide an overview to how to analyze mental models in a wicked problem systems analysis. And if you're checking out this video, it's likely that you've done some of the other analysis problems or analysis levels. So we're hoping that this is just complementing the work that you've already seen. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and I'm going to jump into taking a look at mental models. So first, it's helpful to define wicked problems and wicked problem analysis. So wicked problems are these like really complex problems that have interdependent factors, and they're oftentimes really hard to solve because they're changing over time, and they've got all these different variables. So you can see some examples here, like understanding corruption and disease and war, like issues that have been plaguing human society for a really long time. That doesn't mean that they're unsolvable, though. It just means that they need a special type of solving. So when you analyze a wicked problem, it's important to note that they're a little different than traditional problems. Traditional problems tends to be linear. Wicked problems tend to be all over the place with so many different components. And sometimes it's helpful to use a systems analysis. And oftentimes this systems analysis is shown using an iceberg model. So when you do an analysis of this nature, you're thinking about like what's happening, what are the events, what are the patterns of behaviors and how do they happen over time? What are some of the system structures and what are the mental models that are driving that? So the stages of analysis, as you can see here, are defining a problem, coming up with that story and that evidence of elements and how those things have happened over time, making the problem visible, and then mental model analysis. We've got other videos that show how to do the other things. This video is going to focus in on the mental model analysis. And this is the last phase of analysis before you move into coming up with solutions. So again, just to clarify, this iceberg model or the systems analysis really reflects what we're doing here. So mental models are that last layer of analysis, and oftentimes they have the most leverage, which means they are some of the best places to make change happen in a wicked problem. So let's talk about what are mental models? We've been talking about how they're connected to systems analysis, but here's what they actually are. So a mental model is really this individual thought process or a deep belief system about how something works in the real world. They typically determine how and what we perceive as we look out into the world and as we get older and over time. These mental models form and they shape the way we see and understand the world. So they shape our behavior and they oftentimes guide how we approach problems. So you can see here in this little, this is called the diversity wheel. This has examples of the types of things that influence our mental models. So here in the inner circle, you'll see things that are somewhat fixed, but oftentimes fluid as well. But things like your age or physical abilities or your gender, your sexual orientation, or your race or ethnicity. So these are things that impact how you see the world and how people see you. And those two things have oftentimes a reinforcing relationship that impacts how you understand the world. Also, all these other things on the outside, like where you grew up geographically, whether or not you are Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever, whether or not you are born here in the United States or in California, or whether or not you're born somewhere else. If you have religious beliefs, or maybe you don't. If you're a thinking person who likes why thinking or how thinking or what thinking, all that stuff's going to impact the way you see and understand the world. There's also this thing called mother culture mental models. And these are like mental models that are shared amongst many people. So it's the things that are like our most influencing features, like philosophies, attitudes, values, like things that you and your friends and your family and the other people in your state and even other people in your country, things that they believe to be true or they hold a mental model around. And it doesn't mean that you share it with everybody, but it means you often share it with some people. Like you're going to find people that you have a similar religion or faith to, or if you don't practice that, then you have other people who are agnostic or atheist, right? So you have belief systems. You've got people who speak a similar language to you. Language shapes the way that you see the world and the way you're able to take in information. So those are just some examples. Oftentimes these mental models are not consciously recognized. So sometimes they're just these unquestioned influences or they're hidden underneath the surface and we don't always recognize that that's the thing that's driving it. And that maybe somebody who grew up in Sweden or Japan or Ghana has a totally different way of seeing the same thing that you're looking at just because they grew up somewhere else with different cultural mental models. So these mental models, they influence our collective experience and the collective way that we view the world. So you can have mental models at the individual scale and also at the cultural scale. So let's go a little bit further into like some mental models that drive sustainability issues or just general issues. So when you think about a mental model like the Titanic, which is really just an example of the assumption of scarcity. So in this mental model, people assume that there's not enough to go around and that because things are going terribly, let's just grab all you can while you can. So that's like a way that some people think when they think that there's not enough resources for everyone. Here's one called the bummer. And this is just like a mental model where people saying, things are just the way they are. There's nothing we can do about it. So people who believe that have a mental model that change is not possible. Another one, the social trap. This is really common, especially around youth, that like if others are doing it, I should do it too. Or if no one else is doing it, I shouldn't do it. So what is true for one person then becomes true for everybody. Or if people aren't doing it, then nobody does it. So that's that kind of like peer pressure type situation. This one has formed the basis of our United States capitalist economy system, which is this idea that the invisible hand leads all of the individuals. So there's this belief in our economic system that greed is just natural, and it's totally natural for people to just want and take for themselves. That's just a mental model, though. That's not a fact or reality. In fact, there's many other cultures where it's not like that. But that's a culturally recognized mental model in the United States. Here's one that a lot of people have around this idea that like, hey, things are bad, but we've got a new technology or the market or something's going to come along and save us. So we don't need to change our behavior. Technology will save the day. And in many cases that does happen, but sometimes it doesn't. And so this theory of confidence, this mental model that like somebody's always going to be there to rescue us, when that doesn't come true, it can be really dangerous. Here's one that's very traditional. So this is where people say, well, this is the way we've always done things, so we shouldn't really change it. Or the way things used to be is the way they are now. But that's simply not true. We've seen a lot of change happen over time. Like even here in this example, you can see these are women from the 20th century who are only in roles that were for women, right? But that's not true. And we know that women can do lots of things. And we know that women oftentimes can have the same roles as men. So things don't have to remain the same way. We can see change happen, and gender equality is a really good example of that. Here's a mental model that a lot of people have when they play a game, which is that there's only one winner. So a lot of people, once you start engaging in a game, in any game, we have this belief that there's only one winner. Now that's called a zero-sum game, but there's another type of mental model around non-zero-sum games where you play a game and everyone has to win in order for there to be a winner. We have very few games like that in United States culture, but those games do exist. There are other cultures that have a lot of these games. So when they think of the term game, they make the assumption that it's a non-zero-sum game and they're supposed to work together. In America, when you hear the term game, most people assume there's only one winner and we have to compete. So that's an example of a mental model. Here's a mental model from a full systems analysis. So from the climate change project, that if you've seen our other videos, you've seen this project before. So I'm just going to really quickly jump to that paper so that you can see it. In this project, students analyzed climate change as a problem. So this idea that the Earth's climate is changing and getting warmer, in large part because humans are adding heat trapping gases. So there's a story and a behavior over time that these students looked at. They looked at global temperatures, carbon dioxide, sea level rise, extinction, all these different elements that factored into this. They also looked at how the systems looks in a systems diagram. So they did their systems diagram analysis, and they looked at different loops and what was causing things and what was affecting things. And now they get to their mental model analysis. So in this, the group had to really determine, like, what are the things that are driving all of those negative effects that we're seeing? So one mental model that they used was this idea that the planet is a resource for humans to use up. And they actually analyzed this by looking at Judeo-Christian beliefs, and they dug pretty deep into it and found that there's this mental model that many humans have, especially because Judeo-Christian beliefs have been somewhat the foundation of the United States. Even though this is a country that is supposed to be secular and religious choice, it's still a lot of evidence that these beliefs have formed the basis of our culture. So a lot of people think that in this, people are thinking that they can just use the planet because it's just a resource for humans. Now, that's not true, right? That's just a belief that people have. So another mental model they found was that one person does not have an impact. And they did this by surveying a bunch of different people and found that a lot of people really believe that they don't have impact. Of course, that's not true. And our goal in this project, or their goal in this project, became to shift those mental models to get people to realize that one person does have an impact. And if you can flip it and get a bunch of individuals to collectively change their behavior, collectively, it's going to have an enormous impact. The last one is the technology one. They felt like this one really applied to their project. So I know they talked about it, but I'll explain it here. They felt like a lot of people are just sitting back and not doing much about climate change because they believe that technology is going to save us, that we're going to be able to geo-engineer our way out of this. And there may be some truth to that, like with things like carbon sequestration and other things like that. But on the whole, it's very clear that we do need to change our behavior patterns. So those are some examples of different mental models from a project. Wanted to make sure that you got that in. Now it's going to be your turn to analyze mental models for your project. So first thing that we recommend is brainstorm a list of beliefs, values, assumptions that people have that are contributing to these problems. It might be a little hard to get started, but maybe use some of the ones you've already seen in this video and then kind of go from there and think about other ones that are not there. Then take that brainstorming list and identify 2 to 5 of those that you think are the most relevant individual or cultural mental models driving the problem. Then complete a written analysis, just like the one you saw in that example. So hopefully you'll do great with this. If you have questions, circle back to us at the county office or to your lead mentor.